Hi, Josh.
I don't know if you heard you.
Hi. Hey, Miles. I mean, hi, Marianne. Hey, Miles.
Sure.
What you doing, bud?
I'm building a guitar.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Do I get, you got 2 minutes. Can I see part what you've got done?
Sure.
Better run.
Hurry up, we're about to start. He's just sketching it out right now.
Cool.
And he's gonna.
Is he going to entertain us?
He's got enough guitars. I don't know why he needs to build another one, but you know.
Oh, he's building one.
He's building one. He's already got 3 of them. He's building another one.
Well, that's great.
Hurry up, Miles, we're about to start.
Whoa, it's like a life-size one. It's not just an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper.
No, and then I cut this out and put it on wood, and then I drill out the holes for the pickups and stuff, and then put a neck on it, and it's done.
That is awesome, Miles. Keep up the good work.
Okay. I'll show it to you when it's done.
Okay, I look forward to it. Bye, Miles.
Bye.
Marianne, this is John Pereira. Is Miles the same young man who figured out on his own how to repair autonomous mowers?
Yes, he actually did. He does help his dad with that.
You have an engineer on your hands there.
Yeah, he's artistic, so his dad is the same way. He's artistic and has that engineering mind. So, and he's musical.
So I'm going to go ahead and let anyone in that is from the public, and we're going to go live on Facebook in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we are now broadcasting to all attendees, and we're going to go live on Facebook. Share to page. So we are almost there, everybody. We're almost live on Facebook. Just another 30 seconds. We should be ready to go. And we are, no, come on. Zoom has been acting a little odd today. Okay, and hopefully we are live on Facebook. Just give me another 30 seconds. Let me check.
It says live on Facebook.
Yep. I think we are good to go for Facebook. Let me make sure there's no Planning Commission members in the attendees. And let me start the recording so Marianne doesn't yell at me later. All right. Mr. Chairman, the background IT work is set up and you should be ready to go.
Okay, we'll go ahead and begin this meeting of the Gallatin Municipal-Regional Planning Commission work session for November 2nd, 2020. Let me read a quick notice. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Orders number 16, number 34, number 51, number 60, and number 65, and the need to limit the community spread of COVID-19, members of the Planning Commission will participate by electronic means, and the meeting will be live streamed to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the members and citizens of Gallatin. Mary Ann, if you'll please take a roll call, and those members that are present answer by or respond by saying present and approve if you approve of holding this meeting electronically. So this will be a vote to hold this meeting electronically. Mary Ann, please call the roll.
Chair Pereira,
Present and approve.
Vice Chair Harris,
Present and approve.
Mr. Wilson,
Present and approve.
Councilman Fennell, Dr. Orgain, Mr. Strowther, Ms. Hibbler.
Present and approve.
Good, because I was going to say you don't have a quorum. Okay, great. You do have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary Ann. We just have 4 official items plus a couple of other business items on the work session agenda. So we'll go ahead and get started with item number 1, which is the Sumner County Courthouse. It's a site plan, Kimley Horn and Associates. Jillian, are you presenting this one?
Yes, I am.
Please go ahead.
Yes, this is the site plan request for the Sumner County Courthouse to be located near the downtown square. This will be located next to the library where the current parking lot is for one of the adjacent churches. This will be a 5-story building. It will be predominantly brick construction. The applicant did go to the BZA last month to request a height variance, and that was granted. This is the site plan that you see in front of you with the footprint of the building, as long as the improvements that will be done in front of the building and along the sidewalk. That also includes a crosswalk across Main Street and some additional crosswalks along adjacent streets as well. And then the site will be heavily landscaped as well. So they did provide some renderings of the new courthouse. Again, it is a predominantly brick building with front-facing columns. And here are some elevations as well. And this is for site plan review at the Planning Commission. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jillian. Do we have a representative for the applicant present online?
Randall and Zach, your lines have been unmuted.
Thanks, Josh. Mr. Chairman, this is Zach Dufour with Kimley Horn. I'm the civil engineer for the project. And I think we have Wendell Brown, the architect, and then Randall Coy, the project manager for the county, all on the line to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Zach. Any questions from members of the commission? I'll just lead off the discussion by saying we reviewed this at BZA, and it is just a phenomenal project, and I'm so excited to have it here in Gallatin. It is tall, but they've thought of every detail, and one of the things that we looked at the BZA is they've even taken into consideration the light that will stream into the stained glass windows of the First Baptist Church, and they've set the building back far enough to make sure that the height of this building doesn't impede that light coming into the neighbors. So I think it's a great project, but let's hear from other members.
Yeah, Chair Pereira, I'll echo your comments. I've followed this through the process and watched it through BZA, and I don't have anything negative to say about the project. I think they did a great job getting it on the site. I'm glad to see it's positioned farther back from the road so it doesn't affect the adjacent neighbors. So I'm looking forward to seeing this come to Gallatin.
I concur with both. It's a good looking project.
I think it looks good. Look like it might be a tennis court on top. Is that right?
I can honestly say I spent some time reviewing this and looking through, trying to find something to ask for clarification about. And it's probably one of the more comprehensive set of plans I've seen at this stage. So you guys did a good job on it.
Thank
I
you very
appreciate
much.
that.
Appreciate it.
And Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to add that we have received comments from staff on our initial submittal. We're in the process of going through those. Most, I'd say about 90% are easily addressed and we have no problems with. There's a couple, I'd call them more just clarifications that we want to have a conversation with staff about, but I don't think any of those are major. Certainly some minor comments. We just want to make sure we understand what the staff is looking for. So for the most part, we're in agreement, and we hope that we can get in touch with some of those departments this week, and by the time we come to the Planning Commission, should have for the actual meeting, should have all that worked out.
So I'll just have a question, having not seen the staff report yet. Does this site, this question is for staff, does this site have underground stormwater retention, or does it fall under the square footage footprint that requires that, or below that threshold?
Mr. Preer, this is Nick with engineering. Because the existing site was all completely impervious, they're actually adding some green area as opposed to taking some away. And so we were comfortable in allowing no detention to be required on this, because they should actually be improving the situation. They are doing something a little bit different on the water quality side of things, where our requirements are for 1 inch runoff reduction, which means that the first inch of the rainfall is captured and controlled and held on the site. And just because of the location here and the existing conditions, we were comfortable in going to the alternative, which is in our ordinance and is allowed, and that is what's called 80% total suspended solids removal. And so that means that they're actually there at the southeast corner, down there at the corner of Smith and Boyers. There is a water quality unit that is pretty significant size unit that will be capturing and filtering all the stormwater that is generated from this site before it goes into the storm sewer system and then onto the creek.
Certainly, Nick. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Sorry, Nick, this is Zach. I just wanted to add, this is sort of a late change, but the plaza up in the front that you see, that's brick pavers, not in the street, but actually behind the curb between the steps to the building and the curb line. We're gonna do those impervious pavers. And now I know that that's not treating the whole site, but we thought at least that was a good little area that we could do that. And we thought it helped with the public coming in. Obviously, people still need to go to the courthouse when it's raining, and that'll help alleviate puddles and ponding in the middle, right, as people come up the plaza and up the steps. So we thought that was a way to provide some low impact development, water quality, and also was a good solution for the front door of the courthouse. So you will see that on the resubmittal too.
Great.
That's good to hear. That is an excellent application for permeable pavers.
Well, if there are no other questions, then this project looks great. We look forward to seeing it back in a couple of weeks, and we're excited to have it on our main street in Gallatin. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on.
Comments. Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 2, which is 1160 Nashville Pike. It's an FMDP. And Dustin, you're handling this item?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Next slide. So this is going to be a final master development plan for 1160 Nashville Pike. It's on the north side of Nashville Pike, and it does fall under the Nashville Pike corridor overlay. Next slide. It's going to be a conversion of a former residence into an office space. You can see here, this is the existing site, and they've marked out the carport and some of the trees they're going to be removing. Next slide. So the proposed site plan, you can see it shows the parking lot in the rear, sidewalks, some parallel parking spots coming around the front. Major issue we have, though, is that we're going to need that front driveway access removed to comply with the access requirements of the corridor overlay plan. We're also going to need a sidewalk installed there on Nashville Pike. Now, one thing that we are suggesting is that part of that existing drive could be converted into a walkway, asphalt walkway, connecting the sidewalk we want them to put in to the front door of the building, so that it wouldn't have to be totally removed. Next slide. This is showing their drainage plan for the site. They have a bioretention pond there in the back. I think engineering had a few concerns with some of the drainage issues there on the back side. Next slide. Next slide. This is their landscape plan. You can see their buffer yards they're planning to install. There is a few issues as far as some missing trees from the buffer yard, but I think because of the site size constraints, that they just probably need to ask for an alternative plan. What they're proposing certainly meets the intent of the ordinance, so we would support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. Do we have a representative for the applicant present?
Andy, your line's been unmuted.
I'm here. Sure, as Dustin presented, and we've reviewed the comments, and we still obviously would like to petition the Planning Commission to allow that drive entrance. Doesn't really see any issues with the other comments that were mentioned. What, like I said, I spoke to the owner today, and we're going to try to decrease some of the impervious area between now and when we turn back in. Of course, that has nothing to do with the drive off Nashville Pike, but as far as engineers' comments are concerned with stormwater, we are going to try to get the parking in more alignment with the square footage of the building and not do as much work out front.
Thank you, Andy. I'll just lead off by saying we haven't officially adopted that tree ordinance that we've been talking about yet, but this is one of those sites with a lot of nice existing trees, and a really great benefit of this project and the use that it's being put to is that it's preserving that tree canopy in front. So I'm really glad to see that happen. But I'll open it up, comments or questions from members of the commission about the project. Anyone?
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I was gonna say, just Chair Pereira, just for the record, I'm recusing myself from comments on this property. I have an interest in this project, so it would not be appropriate.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Alana, you had comments?
Yes, sir. I just want to make sure I was clear about what Dustin was saying about the front entry area. So originally, what I heard, originally that it was a residential home, so there was a driveway in front that may or may not wrapped around, but it came from Nashville Pike to the house. And then, so he's saying instead of having that, they're saying, or the staff is suggesting a walkway for pedestrian access.
Yes, Ms. Hibbler, and Nick can probably speak to this better than I can, but the Nashville Pike corridor overlay really discourages multiple access points right off Nashville Pike, and it advocates instead backage roads, which is basically what Lifford Lane would be back there, and connected drive aisles in the rear. So what we were suggesting was, since you need a access to the front door from the public sidewalk, that they could only remove a portion of that existing drive, and the remaining portion could act as a pedestrian walkway.
So that you're saying no car. So if I was coming towards Gallatin, take a right, and not to take a right into the front entry area, I'd have to go down to the next street and take a right, and then take another right.
Yeah, you'd access. I guess I forget what that Warwick Road right there. You'd turn in there, depending on which way you were coming in from, and access from off Lifford Lane there in the back.
Okay. Because I see it, like, I can understand being like a one-way, like the one-way in to reduce the traffic. Are you there as a drive? Just find, like, I've been to a couple businesses on Nashville Pike and easier access from the main road. Like, if you're coming on that side, turning into there versus going all the way around, I'm not sure what kind of, business it being a small office versus, something with higher traffic, like a restaurant or something.
Chris.
Yes, Ms. Hibbler, this is Bill McCord. This is part of the Nashville Pike corridor plan for this whole strip. So this roadway that's located to the north side of the building actually extends along the rear of all of these lots. And there was an easement created to provide this access to eliminate driveways, non-conforming access along this section of Nashville Pike. So on the north side, that access is provided by this Lifford Lane. And on the south side, it's a series of interconnected driveways that is being placed together because we don't have a rear service road. So this would essentially would allow them to, I guess, retain the driveway as it is, assuming it's ADA compliant, although there are handicap parking spaces in the back. But our code requires that all businesses that now front on any roadway other than single family homes have a sidewalk that connects the business to the public sidewalk. So they could achieve that by simply using the driveway. I guess, I don't know what kind of shape it's in, but it might need to be enhanced to make sure it's a proper surface.
Okay.
Chairman, if
Wilson? Yes, sir. Go ahead, Josh.
this is Nick with engineering. And just to try to help clarify for Ms. Hibbler, the Nashville Pike Access Management Plan, and I wish I could show you this on the screen. I don't have it in a digital copy here on my desktop, or I'd try to share it. But the Nashville Pike Access Management Plan was adopted by the Planning Commission in 2001. And you may not be very familiar with it, but there has been significant compliance, miraculously, with this plan from 109 all the way down to Lakeshore Drive. And it's really been, in my opinion, one of the better plans that the city has put together, and done a very good job of sticking with to help clean up and make the access within this corridor very nice and safe and productive for the Nashville Pike corridor. If we continue to stick with it, it actually will allow us to come in at some point in the future and even put a median in Nashville Pike through the area, because we'll have access situated in such a way that you won't have these multiple left turning conflicts trying to turn across the highway, which is in the transportation world, it's called a suicide lane for a reason. And it's just on a facility that sees 40,000 vehicles a day. It's not what you want to see, just various driveways strewn to and fro at various locations. And so trying to control those access points and put them in locations that are strategic and planned out, is what we've tried to do and done a really good job. And just as Mr. McCord was saying, the north side is actually in great shape because there's a backage road that has been constructed now from Tulip Poplar Drive all the way down to where the Verizon building now it sits empty, but that Verizon building. And so Lifford Lane is what it's being called here behind this business. And so there will actually be connection down to Tulip Poplar Drive, which we expect to be signalized at some point in the future. And then, as Dustin was mentioning, you get back over to Warwick, which gets you both to Nashville Pike or back out to Tulip Poplar Drive near Nashville or near Belvedere Drive. And so I understand that this particular business may not have a ton of trips generated, but just to continue to stay with that plan and stay consistent with what we have approved and really fair across the board, because it wasn't too long ago that someone I think it was Kirby Electric, just about 4 houses down, had this very same situation. I say very same situation. Actually, theirs was a little bit different because Lifford Lane wasn't constructed behind their business. But in this case, you do have the backage road that's already constructed. So Kirby was actually connecting through an interconnected parking lot, which was really not as ideal as this particular situation is. So I think it would certainly be a miss by the city if we were to allow this access to stay when it really, from a planning perspective, we set it up for success.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, Nick.
So, are there any other questions?
I have one other question. Is there public sidewalks on both the back road and Nashville Pike, or just the back road access? Because I can't see on this plan.
I believe they're just on the north side of Lifford Lane. Is that correct, Nick?
Yes, sir. Then when we approved Preston Park, we didn't require a sidewalk along the south side of Lifford Lane. That was allowed to be an open space, and the buffer yard was allowed to be placed in it, which kept the sidewalk from being constructed. So there's actually a nice tree row, existing foliage and landscaping that's in that now, and so all that would need to be removed, sidewalk to be added. So we hadn't required it on that. I think we're just referring to the sidewalk on Nashville Pike.
Do we have any other questions or discussion? We need to give I think that the purpose of this meeting is to give the applicant or the applicant's representative some direction on what to bring before some direction before our meeting. We don't have to. I mean, the purpose of this meeting is to educate us on, or to go through and study the items before our meeting. But does anyone have any additional comments?
No, I don't have any.
Okay, none. It appears that we just need to kind of mull this over and think about it before our meeting in a couple of weeks. Then, and we'll give it some thought. Thank you for bringing it to us, and we'll see it back in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is Gallatin Industrial Center, Phase 4, a preliminary plat. Jillian, you're handling this one?
Yes. And item number 4 is item number 4 is the final plat. So I'll just discuss these together if that's all right.
Sure.
Okay. So this is for the Gallatin Industrial Center Phase 4. This is the Wool Hawk / Facebook property that was included in the annexation. Most of it was included in the annexation and rezoning that occurred earlier this year. This is for a little over 800 acres. They will be splitting the property and moving the property lines to create 11 parcels. This is in order also to dedicate the right-of-way for the extension of Gateway Drive to Hartsville Pike. So again, this is just platting to kind of establish that right-of-way predominantly and reconfigure some of the property boundaries. And this is the preliminary plat and the final plat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Do we have a representative for the applicant present?
Yes, this is Brad Simpson with Barge Design Solutions.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brad.
So as Jillian said, this is just to kind of clean up where some existing property lines or previous property lines were, remove those. And then where the roadway, where the roadway is being proposed, and now we'll kind of bisect some of those other properties just to make sure we're cleaning those things up and addressing them. And then lot 8, that's kind of in the southeastern area, is the lot where the GPU lift station is going to be located. There's no other proposed developments for any of these other adjacent lots. It's just to kind of clean things up and make sure that the site is a little bit more coherent. Oh, and I will add that lot 9 there, that looks like it's in the middle, is just for the TVA substation. They ask to own the property that their substation's on.
Okay. What is in the center of the plan? What is the building with the parking lot around it? The PEMB.
It's just a pre-engineered metal building. That's the contractor's, we'll call it temporary building, kind of a glorified construction trailer. But since the construction phase takes a little longer than what most sites are, and they've got a significant number of employees and contractors on site, it's a cleaner way of having trailers. They do have trailers out there now, and they will for the next few months until they get this building constructed. But ultimately, it's just a contractor's office.
No, that clears it up completely. I knew that we had not seen that on the previous site plan, so that makes sense.
It was shown on the site plan.
Oh, was it?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, well, this is obviously an incredibly exciting project. Questions for the applicant or for staff? Anyone?
I didn't see anything on this. It looks pretty straightforward.
I agree. Alana, anything?
I also agree. No.
Mr. Will?
None.
Well, seeing none, then we'll move on. Thank you very much for your time. We'll move on to other business. We have a couple of items to discuss under other business. That would be Vintage Bakers Crossing development, and then also the fence, walls, and hedge regulation ordinance proposal. Who's handling the first discussion item about Vintage Bakers Crossing?
I'll introduce it. This is Jillian Ogden.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jillian.
Yes. So we wanted to open up a discussion about the Vintage Bakers Crossing development. The applicant did come to us and want to discuss a couple proposed changes that they are considering. Now, you guys have voted on this. This hasn't gone to City Council yet, but you guys did make a determination last week. So this is just a discussion item. There's no decisions to be made or anything like that. And once the applicant has spoken about what the proposed changes that they're considering, I think Bill wanted to elaborate on some further research that we did into the master plan for Bakers Crossing. So I believe the applicant should be in on the line, Josh.
Yeah, hi, this is Greg Harris with Infield Group. We're the civil engineers on the project, and I think Ross Bradley, the developer builder with TDK, is with us, and Gina Emanuel, the architect with Centric Architecture as well. Really appreciate you letting us join in tonight and speak to this revision that we proposed. We have reduced the number of units from 264 to 252, really in an effort to try to avoid prolonging the project and having to go back to City Commission. And we would like to see if we could get this considered a minor revision, since we'll be maintaining the same number of units as the approved plan, the existing approved plan. The way we reduced the number of units, we kept the number of buildings the same, but modified buildings 1, 2, and 3, which front tulip poplar. And we went to a 2-story, 3-story split. So it'll be 2 stories on the tulip poplar side. So when you drive down tulip poplar on the frontage, you'll see 2-story units. And Gina's done a nice job with designing these, and it'll have a townhome look that originally the staff was hoping would be able to work out with that along tulip poplar, similar to the Preston Park. And you know, I think she's done a really good job with that. And those will be, with the transitioning that to a 2-story, 3-story split, will be more at grade with tulip poplar, and we would be able to connect sidewalks from the public tulip poplar sidewalk to each of the buildings. So those units will have access to the sidewalk and tulip poplar, and all the residents of each building will be able to use those, but it'll have that townhome look more than maybe more than a typical garden style apartment look.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Did you say Mr. Bradley and Ms. Gina Emanuel wanted to speak or not?
I think this is Gina Emanuel. I think Greg summed it up well. I think we were just trying to discuss what our next steps could be if we made these changes, which we feel work pretty well for our site plan.
Yeah, and this is Ross Bradley, and I just echo what Greg said. You know, timing is of the essence with us. You know, we're under a limited timeline on our land contract with our bank that we currently have this under contract with, and so if we had to go back to council, we would be looking at not getting an approval until after the first of the year, and that just that really hinders our land contract. So we went back and explored options that we hope are win-win for everybody, and hopefully you like what you see. Nick, I think you're getting ready to say something.
Yes, I have. I think Bill McCord wanted to speak, and then we'll call Nick. Bill, did you have comments?
Yes, this has been a quite confusing process. This project was originally approved in 2006, and we don't normally go back and read the details of all those ordinances that affected the original zoning and any master plan changes. But there are a number of changes that we wanted to make sure we double checked because of the confusion presented here. Now, the original ordinance, which was in 2006, had a legal description attached to it, which indicated, and it had this master plan that you see on your screen. And that ordinance amended the zoning on a 50-acre portion of property. And that 50 acres, as described in the ordinance, includes all of this property here that you see on this survey, or we'll call it a survey, this site plan. And, you know, the dark dotted line that you see that envelops most of the apartment site and some other properties, including the hotel site, and actually a residentially zoned lot that's called Tract 2, were not included in the legal description of the rezoning, like Tract 2 wasn't. But that property to the east, that's east of that dotted line, that's shown as CG zoning and CS zoning, that was included in the legal description. The title of the ordinance indicates only a 37.72 acre portion of the property. So it's quite confusing as to how that ordinance was written. I believe it might have been the intent of the property owner to only include a portion of their property under the master plan and not rezone the easterly portion of the property, just northeasterly portion here, but that's not what the legal description that's attached to the ordinance says. The legal description also does not include tract 2, but tract 2 appears to be included in the master plan, at least under the drawing. Tract 2, as best we can tell by tracing the legal description, is still zoned R20, and that was not reflected in any of the subsequent plans that came through, including the initial plan here and the other plans that result in later amendments. So what we have is a piece of property, apparently tract 2 is still zoned R20, and based on the legal description, not the title of the ordinance, but the legal description, that all of the property here, with the exception of those lots that are adjacent to Nashville Pike, which are part of a PMDP amendment to an earlier master plan. Stay with me now. I know this is confusing.
Or if I could ask a quick question, could you use a cursor and clarify the area you're saying still R20? Just
Yeah, Julian's got, or Dustin one's got control of that. The R20 is that little tract 2. You might not be able to read it at this scale.
Let's see.
There's a house on that property.
Yep, I'm familiar.
So it might have been the intent to include that as part of the rezoning from R20, because this portion of the property where tract 2 is, and the southwesterly portion of tract 1, which is the southwesterly portion of the apartment site, was zoned R20 at that time. So the property that got zoned M2 based on the legal description includes all of the property where the apartments are proposed, the hotel sites, and the other buildings there that will eventually be associated with the hotel, and all that property to the east, all the way up to, well, almost to where they're building that preschool child care center there. So that's what the legal description calls for. I don't know what they were intending to do, because you can't have a master plan with CG zoning or R20 zoning or CS zoning. Those districts do not require a master plan, only the MU district. So this whole ordinance really needs to be refabricated, and we have a request into our city attorney's office to get an interpretation based on the way this thing has been put together. It is very much like mixing apples and oranges together. So, but one thing is clear is what the legal description of that ordinance is. To make things more complicated, shortly after this plan, the initial plan was approved, another plan came in as an amendment, and Jillian might have that one.
Yeah.
Okay, if you can switch over, advance.
Yep.
Okay, I guess this was the second plan that came in. It was an amendment to that first plan. Remember, the first plan, all it had was a note that said you're entitled to X number of units, and I think it was 478 units. This plan came in a couple of years later, and specifically identified a layout for the apartment complex. And you see they had some very large buildings back there on the westerly portion of the property, and it crossed over into the flood zone, and it was just kind of you see the elaborate drainage lines and the parking lot and all that kind of thing. So that plan got approved with 358 units, but only 290 of those units were in this portion that got amended. The little arc that is along the back side of the west side of Tulip Poplar Drive, and if Jillian, you can use your cursor to kind of mark that. There you go, right there. That whole area was kind of held in reserve, and it was not amended. So there were 68 units in there that were identified as a phase 2 of this development. And those were the 68 units that were originally identified in the original plan when they just totaled up the number of units. So in this case, they had almost a 2-phase development for apartments on the west side, and this 68 held in reserve. And that's reflected in the notes over here on the right side of the plan as well. So that one got approved that way. And then in 2011, we can flip over there.
Mm-hmm. Working on it.
Couple of years later, we had, okay. And then they came back in and did something a little bit different, smaller and more numerous buildings, generally still in this western half of the area in a footprint or lot footprint that was even a little bit smaller than the previous one. But they didn't amend that portion where the 68 lots on that arc adjacent to Tulip Poplar. That still was not part of any amendment, so it was part of the original previously approved plan. So that part didn't get amended. Now this tract 1A above did get amended, and it's real unclear as to what that tract 1A above is. There is a chart on the right side of the plan there, and at that scale, obviously you can't read it, but it didn't assign any residential units to that. So tract 1A, I don't know what they intended to have there. It's possible that they could have put something, maybe whatever will work in MU that would be behind the phase 2 units that were held in reserve, those 68 units. So what we had here was 297 units that are shown graphically on here on the west part. The 68 units that were reserved, which were never amended from this previously approved plan. And this was the Tennessee Hills done in 2011, I believe it was. So that was the last approved iteration of the apartment complexes. Now, obviously, since that time, we've had other amendments in this area, including where the hotels are. They went through 2 or 3 different iterations there, and have, of course, gone through some final master plans. The first part of it was the bank there that's on the corner. That was the first final master plan, and the second final master plan was associated with that bank, which was the short extension of Tulip Poplar from Nashville Pike. And then also in 2011, the rest of Tulip Poplar Drive was final master plan and then platted as well. So there's been some progress, slow progress, I would call it, but some progress throughout this whole process. Now, the state office, the office building that the state is leasing, I guess, was perceived at the time as being constructed in the CG zoning district, even though the legal description does not have it as CG. There almost seems to be implied that there was an exception out, or this area was being accepted out of the 51 acres, but it doesn't read that way. If you think this is confusing, it took us quite a while to go through this and try to figure it out. So what they had proposed is at the last meeting that y'all reviewed was a 264 unit, which included that reserve area. Those 68 units that were reserved. So they only had 264 units, where previously the last plan that y'all reviewed had 252 plus 68 units. So 300 and, get my math right, 320 units were essentially vested, if you will, based on the previous units. And now they've broken it down to 264. And as you've heard tonight, they even considered reducing it even to 252 because they were going to reduce the height of the building along Tulip Poplar. So that took a few more units out. So this is at least not a increase in density of these buildings. One thing that we will need to look at is the proximity to the R20 zoning, because there is a buffer yard required between those 2 uses, and they may need to modify that to correct that buffer yard between those 2 uses. And so we're looking at a decrease in density in units per acre and number of units, of raw numbers, because the acreage is modified a little bit. So y'all made 3 conditions as to reasons why it should be elevated to a major amendment. One of those was density, which no longer and unless the attorney's office tells us differently, no longer comes into play here. And I don't think it comes into play either way, because that portion of the property is not subject to the rezoning like the easterly portion of the property. That's suspect at this point. And the other two items were architecture, which I'll determine it was a substantial change in architecture, and the other was grading changes that would occur on the property. So we want y'all to look at that, and you're not obligated by any means to change your vote, but if you believe that that's a basis, then someone on the planning commission could then offer an amendment to reconsider that item, and it would have to be approved by, get this correct here.
Gail, I need to jump in. It wouldn't be a motion to reconsider. It'd be a motion to rescind the adopted motion regarding this matter.
Okay.
And in order for that to happen, you would need a majority vote, because this would be considered notice of the possibility of this motion. So you just need a majority vote. And what Bill was going to tell you, if there was no notice, you would have to have at least 2/3 of the body to vote to rescind the adopted motion.
Okay. Well, I just took an aspirin and put another one in my pocket for in the morning. That was incredibly thorough research, and I think the staff, but I'll be honest, that'll take me like a lot of reading to fully understand it and follow all the areas that you talked about. I do know that the plan that they brought before us tonight eliminates any concerns I had about it being an increase in the number of units. That was the only reason that I wanted it to council to be aware of it. If you recall, we made a motion to approve recommendation of the plan that they brought to us a week ago. We sent a motion to recommend approval of that, but we did send it to council because we felt like council needed to be aware of it and be able to have a voice on the matter if it was an increase in the number of units. In my opinion, they've eliminated the concern about the number of units, and most certainly it's an improvement in architecture, which arguably even the first plan was an improvement in architecture. Everything else that was discussed about what was changed in the legal descriptions in the plan from 2006 and 2011, I would have to have some time to look at that. But if I understand this, the attorney, we can't even make the motion to rescind our previous motion because we do not have a 2/3 of our members here present tonight.
Well, you can't make that tonight anyhow. You'd have to do that at the regular meeting in 2 weeks.
That's correct. Again, this is Lieutenant Alexander. I wasn't implying that you make that motion tonight. I was just explaining what you could do in order to change what was done at the last voting meeting.
Okay. Oh, I'm afraid I skipped over. Did our city engineer want to weigh in? Did you have comments, Nick?
Chairman, no, I didn't really have anything to add. I know that I had also talked with the applicant on some things regarding traffic, but none of those things are things that would affect, I don't think, your decision for whether or not this is a major or minor. Other than the applicant was willing to go really above and beyond, even in that area, to study and maybe even make some improvements that were not necessarily in the scope of what they were required to do. And so I don't know if that's something that you want to consider in your decision or not, but just for what it's worth.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, John, I've been on the meeting for the last 25 minutes.
Hello, Dr. Orgain. I didn't know you were here. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I've incredible traffic trying to get home.
Oh. So let me open this up for discussion from members of the commission, either questions for the applicant or questions for staff.
I have questions about drainage. I know the original and the first ones that were presented, the site was in another location. Majority of the site was in another location. Has the site that it's been arranged brought up to closer this area? Has that been looked at as far as any flooding issues? I know the back part of the other one, there was flooding issues, but has this area there where it's been adjusted to, has that been looked at for flooding or drainage, or how they're going to handle any that might be there?
Yes, ma'am. We moved the site away from the floodway, which the previous plans had that in the floodway. There are a portion of a couple of buildings and parking that are in the floodplain, and we're going to be elevating those to 3 feet above the floodplain of the flood elevation, the 100-year flood elevation. So they'll be 3 feet above that.
My comments on this, obviously the last meeting, I didn't feel this needed to be a major amendment to the point about the increase in the density for the units. If the applicant's decreasing the number of units, I have even fewer concerns about it. In talking about the architecture, the architecture, the original plans were multi-story apartment buildings. I think while this proposal is an improvement on that, I still don't see that it was a substantial change in the architecture. It didn't go from 1-story rental units to 3-story rental units. That would be significant. Now, some of the character maybe changed a little bit, but the intent and the spirit of the buildings, I don't think really changed that much. They've always been apartment buildings, so I didn't have a problem with that at all. So now getting to the zoning and all the things for the planning department of how that affects it, like Mr. Brewer said, that's going to take a minute to digest and see it. But on the surface, I felt like this should have been a minor amendment all along. So I don't have a problem if it now even more so meets those requirements to see it go that way at the next meeting.
We have, go ahead, Bill.
I just wanted to mention, depending on what action that the, I guess after the discussion tonight, that they said they're in a hurry. I didn't realize they were in such a hurry. It really doesn't have any bearing on what we do here, but this item is scheduled, as y'all had recommended, to go to the City Council Committee on November 10th. So what we'll be presenting to them on November 10th is y'all's recommendation. And I don't know how council committee will want to address it, but the applicant certainly has the option of, depending on where they think this modification is going, to assuming that someone would make a motion and there would be a 5-7 vote, because it would require a 2/3 vote. You'd have to have at least 5 to meet that 2/3 vote for reconsideration and to rescind the previously approved resolution. But if that's the way y'all wanted to go with it, then the applicant might elect to defer action before the City Council Committee until y'all made a consideration for a reconsideration for another resolution. By then, we would also have the opinion from our city attorney's office on the structure of the ordinance, and that would affect their master plan possible.
This is Latisha Alexander again, and I appreciate, Bill, you saying that we will have that opinion by that time period. Just based on the information that I heard today in our previous conversations, it is very complex. So I'm not going to guarantee that our opinion will be ready in that time period. And also, just for correction, should you all decide to rescind your previously adopted motion, you can also, as long as you have a majority of the body, because again, you have noticed today that that's a possibility, then you can do the rescission.
Ms. Alexander, I'm not trying to be funny when I ask this question, but can I call a special call meeting of the Gallatin Municipal-Regional Planning Commission to be held at 6:15 this evening? and vote on this? We have 5 members. Or does it have to have notice?
You have to have, no, you would have to have notice, and you have to follow the same notice procedure that you would for any special call meeting, so that the public is aware. And it has to be reasonable notice, and I don't think this would be reasonable notice for us to call a special call meeting.
Yeah, I know that. The dilemma is that council is going to meet in their work session before we have a chance to meet again. And I don't know how to, I'm perfectly fine with making a motion to rescind our previous motion because of their good faith efforts that they've shown with this plan, but I don't see a path forward to get there.
Well, from my understanding, this is not, as of yet, placed on the agenda for City Council's work session. So perhaps it might not need to be placed on the next work session agenda.
That's right, Mr. Chairman. The applicant could elect to defer it from work session agenda, and they could delay that until perhaps after the Planning Commission is made their rescinded or reconsidered, I guess is probably the better way. And then if things don't go, I guess, as the Planning Commission with this alternate plan as the applicant would prefer, then they can lift their request for deferral and then move forward at the next work session before the council, which would be, well, I'm not sure if the council's having a work session on the 24th. Since that's a holiday week, it may have to wait until December. But so, I mean, that would be a delay, possibly again because of the holiday.
Well, any other input? That's the only path forward I've heard.
Latasha Alexander again. From my understanding, I understand that the applicant does have some say, but we could just not move it forward to work session simply because of the information that Mr. McCord has brought forward to the Planning Commission tonight regarding the complications with the legal description. And then that would give it time to go back before the Planning Commission to determine whether you are going to choose to make a motion to rescind your previously adopted motion based on the information you've been provided tonight regarding the changes that the applicant is going to make, or has made, actually.
Okay, Ms. Alexander, while you're still there, will we, uh-oh, I think I may have lost my connection. Can you still hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I've just lost the video connection. If we do that for our next meeting, which is in a couple of weeks, are we able to both rescind our previous motion to make it a major amendment and send to council, and also on that same, in that same meeting, approve this revised site plan? 2 separate votes.
Yes. So,
okay.
Yeah, so officially you'll just be rescinding the adopted motions that were made at the previous regular meeting. And then you'll go forward with the new stuff that you've been presented today or tonight.
Okay, I don't know if that has to be two agenda items and therefore two votes, or if you can roll into 2 and just have one item and have 2 votes. I can only speak for myself. I'll let other people speak up. If this revised plan that they brought forward, I would be happy to do both of those things mentioned. Rescind the previous and vote to approve it as a minor, just kind of giving the applicant some direction. It's a nice plan they brought forward tonight. Other people? Yeah.
With that, so.
I'm sorry, I was talking over you. But go ahead.
No, I agree with you, John. I think, of course, this is kind of my position in the previous meeting, but I think the reduction of the units clearly puts this as a minor amendment, and would I think we could take care of it at the planning commission level and move this down the road.
Mr. Chair, we will consult with our legal team about what's the proper instruments to prepare for anticipating consideration of a new or revised plan, as well as possibly creating a separate resolution to rescind the one that y'all had recommended last month, and have a totally new resolution for the revised plan.
Very good. Any other input from members of the commission?
That's good.
All right, then we'll move on to the last discussion item, which is the fence, walls, and hedge regulation ordinance discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I put this back on the agenda for discussion because at the last meeting, y'all had deferred action on this, and I got the feeling that y'all wanted to talk about it in more detail and not to spend a lot of formal meeting time discussing it. So is to remind you a little bit about what we're proposing is to change our fence code, fence and wall regulations to allow taller fences in certain circumstances where residential lots are adjacent to commercial or industrial lots or multifamily residential zoned properties where there's a multifamily development adjacent to it. The main issue of discussion at that time was that the fence and walls that are built 7 feet or greater in height have to have a structural permit from the building department, which would require a little bit more review of a fence permit, not just a location on a lot. We also wanted to make sure that those structural facilities, whether it's a wall or a fence that are 7 feet or higher, could not be placed in a public utility and drainage easement because essentially they're permanent type structures. So a fence that's 6 foot tall, shadow box type fence can fairly easily be removed from an easement, but a wall or structural fence could not. So there's the big difference there. The other thing that we talked about is whether or not require all fences, not just fences in commercial and industrial areas, but all fences to be coated with vinyl coating or similar type coating, so that would do away with someone being able to put up a chain link 4 foot fence, which is common in a residential zoning district. So I don't know if you want to go that far on that one or not. That was one of the provisions that was also discussed as part of the proposed changes to the fence code. So the big crux of this issue is the height. So if it's 7 feet or greater in height, it's going to have to be scrutinized a lot more, and there are a lot more restrictions. But you could get one on a residential property if it were met those construction requirements.
All right. Any discussion? I'll throw a comment out there. Chuck Stewart gave us some important information at the last meeting, and I had asked him a couple of times in that meeting, but wasn't able to get, maybe I didn't convey my question very well. Was Mr. Stewart, I don't suppose Mr. Stewart's present on this work session call, is he?
I don't think so.
Okay. Was he indicating that codes really does not want this 7 foot or this taller fence to be allowed in the residential district because it would be difficult for codes to incorporate residential properties into their enforcement? Or was he simply cautioning us about the need for a structural, an engineering design and a permitting process on these?
As I recall, I don't think he had any concern about what the zoning was on the property, only that it meet the building requirements. And he got into some real specifics about what is required of a building code, about specific design of the post and how deep they have to sit in the ground and how much concrete they have, and that the boards have to be screwed in instead of nailed in. And so he got into some details about that. I don't think he had any concern about whether it was in a residential zone district or in a commercial or industrial zone district.
Okay, that was the part I couldn't quite understand. Is I was wondering if he was discouraging us from expanding this out into residential district because it would overwhelm the code staff, but apparently not. So if you're looking for some discussion, I'll just say that I like the way it was written, and it seems like it protects, it allows some flexibility for people who are right up against commercial properties, and it makes sure that we get strong, sturdy fences built and engineered plans in place. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I agree with you, John. I think we're talking about with taller fences adjoining commercial property, where the commercial property would have the right to build that same type of fence. I don't see any issues with that. Mr. McCord, going back, you say one of the things that was in the ordinance, and I think I recall reading it, was the vinyl coatings on chain link fences. So currently in our ordinance, our code, a 4-foot tall residential chain link fence does not require a vinyl coating, but this is suggesting that we require that throughout the city. Is that what I understood?
Well, yes, if it as written, if you adopt it as written, it would require future fences to be vinyl coated in residential districts.
Yeah.
So you might not want to go that far.
I think in certain neighborhoods that could make sense, but I think the neighborhoods where that would make sense probably already have a restrictive covenants that would prevent a vinyl chain link fence anywhere. That does add a significant cost to what's usually a fairly affordable fence. So I don't know that I would feel comfortable, in some of the lower income areas or areas where someone needs to fence the yard, but just that extra expense might be a burden. So that I might think is a little bit far at this point. But
Okay.
the height requirements I don't have a problem with.
Okay.
Other input, Ms. Hibbler or Mr. Wilson, Dr. Orgain?
Oh, I have none.
All right. I believe if there's no other discussion, then are there any announcements? Seeing none, then we will stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.